morning, and good morning to all of you. So this was originally going to be a moderated candidates forum, and Ms. Morrow was unable to be with us today. So it's really going to be a conversation with Mr. Green. NCASA has done a great job of putting together a list, a pretty comprehensive list of questions. So we're going to take the time we have today, ask those questions, and give you an opportunity to speak to those.
Excellent.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. So we're going to begin with, what are your top priorities for K-12 education in North Carolina? And if elected, why should the state's public school leaders support you for this office?
Great, thank you, and good morning to everyone. I'm actually going to flip the question and maybe start with why Mo Green? As the governor said this morning, I believe in public schools. I believe in public education, and I believe that I have lots of experience in public education. When we think about this position, I think about it in sort of two major buckets. One would be around administration and leadership, and the other would be around information and advocacy. And when you think about my experiences, certainly I've had experience managing and leading complex organizations, and would equip me well, I would suggest, to run an organization that administers $11 billion annually, that license over 100,000 teachers and other administrators, that sets the standard course of study, assessments, and accountability. And then when you think about the information and advocacy, as I already have stated, I am one that believes in public education and the transformative value that it can bring to students who are in our public schools. I also understand that there are issues and challenges that face our schools, but I approach them from this vantage point. We must celebrate the good in public education. We must highlight that constantly. And there needs to be someone who starts from that place, even as we work on issues and challenges. So then that as a framework, what are my top priorities? The top priorities are ones in that second bucket, if you will, around advocacy. I believe that we must fully fund public education. The day has long since passed where we are not funding our schools as they should. You heard the governor talk about some of the numbers. I'll just give you some more. North Carolina finds itself, in a report that was done a few years ago, 48th in the entire country with regards to public education funding. And that same report looks at the effort that each state puts towards public education. And so in some ways, that is a really important measure, because if you are a poor state, maybe you can't afford to do as much with regards to public education. North Carolina in 2022 was found to be at the absolute bottom with regards to funding of public education and the effort that it can put towards it. Last year, we moved to 49th. This, my friends, is unacceptable. And so that is my top priority. And then sort of right there next to it would be revering our educators. And I use that word intentionally. For those who know me from Guilford County Schools know that this is not a new word. I need folk to understand where we ought to be placing our educators. And first of all, and let's be abundantly clear, I'm not just talking about teachers when I talk about educators. I am talking about the custodians and the cafeteria workers and the bus drivers and all that are impacting our students. And when I say revere, I'm absolutely including, but not limited to, increasing the compensation for all of these individuals. We ought to be moving to a place of excellence, which is probably the actual priority for me. I want us to adopt a vision in North Carolina. It is actually one we used in Guilford County Schools, and so it's something that I embraced and folks there embraced as well. It is a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. And we combine that with a focus on nothing less than being the best. Our state, North Carolina, we should be having the best public schools in the entire country. And so those first two priorities are critically important to that. The third one would be this idea that we must support our lower performing schools with substantial additional resources, while also being sure that we support all of our schools with things like science of reading and that implementation. Things like, I believe, a robust character development program. I've spent a long time on this question, but I want people to understand where I am. And if elected, where we're going. Because we deserve, and our children deserve, nothing less than the best. And so if you want to get on the Mo train, understand that this one is leading to places folk have no idea where we're going, other than we're going to stop at being the absolute best school system in the entire country.
Thank you. So you have covered a lot of our questions already with the first one. So you've talked a little bit about funding being a priority. You've talked about low performing schools and this additional support system that they need in place, and of course salaries. Along those lines, on February 22nd, the North Carolina Supreme Court heard the latest oral arguments in the decades-long Leandro case, with one of the key issues being whether the state's judicial system has the authority to bypass the normal budget process and order hundreds of millions of dollars in additional funding for our public schools. What is your perspective on the current level of state funding provided to public schools, and what, if any, changes are needed to any specific allotments or areas of school support with funding?
So yeah, I think I've addressed the question in many ways, but I want to be sure that folks understand that I don't just come to this with, having no experience with regards to funding levels. You'll see and understand that I was the attorney in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools was one of the urban districts that joined the Leandro litigation. I appeared before Judge Manning and shared with him some of the things that we were trying to do in Guilford County Schools. And then I served as the executive director for the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. It is the foundation that actually funds the low wealth plaintiff school districts in the Leandro litigation. And the foundation is proud to do that. The foundation also funded an independent consultant that put together a report for the court with the main question being, well, what's needed in our public schools? And the answer is there needs to be billions of additional dollars into our public schools. And so the foundation, of which I was the executive director, we were proud to be part of providing the resources for an independent consultant to come back with whatever that consultant thought the number should be. And so I understand from all of those perspectives how underfunded our public school system actually is. I can get down to the weeds. We talk about allotments, and I started thinking about, well, as you were asking the question, well, what allotments are underfunded? And by gosh, I couldn't, maybe if I keep thinking, I'll come up with one. I don't know that I can. Every way that we look at things, almost from any perspective, the allotments are underfunded. And so there needs to be a substantial increase in our allotments across the board. And so that's the best answer I can give you for that.
Okay, all right, thank you. So still talking about funding from a different angle, the 2023 state budget greatly expanded our state's Opportunity Scholarship Program by making all students eligible for private school vouchers regardless of prior school enrollment or family income, and by substantially increasing funding that is currently set to reach approximately $520 million in 2032. What are your views on the recent expansion, and what, if any, changes are needed to this program?
Yeah, I want to start here. And in many ways, I so align with the governor on this. But I want to start with, I'm actually a fan of school choice. And believe that we ought to be providing, many opportunities and different types of ways of educating our children. And so I come from systems, if you will, that provided enormous choice, and would want to see those opportunities expanded across the state. Parents should be able to have choices. They should. But when you start talking about taxpayer dollars, public dollars, those dollars need to be in our school system that we've already discussed is woefully underfunded. And so to then have a voucher program that is going to take already funds that aren't there, so they're going to take funds from something where children need them in our public schools and have them go to private schools. And I tend to be one that likes to listen, learn, compromise. This is a hard no. This cannot be where our dollars go. And then on top of that, to say that someone who is wealthy can take advantage of this opportunity and have their have government assistance go to them when they don't need it. And I got kids across this state that need those dollars. We need to stop this. If there was anything that got me into this race, if you point to any one thing, this was it. Because our kids in public schools deserve those dollars and need the dollars, as opposed to having them going into private schools.
All right, thank you. So you mentioned earlier revering our teachers and our employees. Along those lines, recruitment and retention of teachers and support staff remains one of the top concerns for our school and district leaders who often say they are competing with the private sector. What would you tell a current student who wants to become a teacher but is considering a higher paying job in the private sector? And what steps will you take to address our teacher and our staffing shortage?
Yeah. So, have had to have these kind of conversations with lots of individuals who are considering becoming teachers. As you perhaps have already heard, the way that I would approach someone who's thinking about this as a profession is to understand that this is a noble profession. We are in an era where people don't value our educators and our teachers in particular. And so I would want to be sure that they understand that no, don't pay attention to the noise. This is a noble profession. You would be doing remarkable work on behalf of your community, our state, our country, and I dare say the entire world if you become a teacher. Because you will be touching the lives of so many other individuals who will go off to do amazing things. Some of this we can't put the value on. And so as you are considering that private sector job, and I worked in the private sector, and I understood how meaningful it was for me to move into the world of education. Not that I didn't enjoy working in the private sector, I did. Not that I didn't enjoy the clients that I worked for and with, I did. But there is something so different about this profession that you almost have to see it and be it and believe it, feel it to believe it. Now, I'll be upfront and honest. You are going to work hard. There are going to be days where you're going to be challenged beyond measure. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I will certainly talk about the benefits that we need to try to continue to hold on to that are in the teaching profession, things like health care and retirement benefits. They're good, particularly compared to the private sector. So the one major thing is around compensation. I believe if these individuals will join with the rest of our community across this state, we can tackle that issue as well. And so you can be the change agent that takes us from 46th in the country to the national average, to the #1 state with regards to what we pay our teachers. That is part of the challenge that I would be giving those individuals. That you're going to be the educator in the classrooms and all that, but you're also going to set the mark for where we're going with regards to things like compensation. Come join the team.
Thank you. So we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about instruction and accountability. Superintendent Truitt and her team recently proposed replacing our state school performance grades model, which is one letter grade based upon 80% on student proficiency and 20% on student growth, with a new multi-indicator model that provides 4 different letter grades in the area of academics, progress, readiness, and opportunity. What are your thoughts on this newly proposed model or other school accountability system reforms you would like to see the General Assembly approve?
Great. So first things first, certainly appreciate that Superintendent Truitt was putting forward an alternative. My first comment would be, to the state board and to Catherine Truitt and to the General Assembly, let's sit tight. Let's not put anything in place until we get the next state superintendent that allow that person the opportunity to weigh in on this as well. The second thing I'll say is this, and this is true from my time as superintendent in Guilford County Schools. I'm not a fan of letter grades. I don't believe that any child should have an F placed on them just because of the school they go to. So folks in Guilford County know that when that came out, I said, you know what? This isn't right. And so we'll do what we must as far as presenting that information, but that's not how we're going to be evaluating ourselves. The 80-20 split, with proficiency being at 80% and growth being at 20%, that was, I believe, also not a good model. Because growth, I believe, is so critically important in what our educators are doing every day. Now, having multiple models, multiple criteria, things to consider I like that. Because schools ought to be evaluated on multiple things. Absolutely, proficiency should be one of them. Growth should be one of them. The climate in the school should be considered. What do students think about what's going on in the school? There are multiple things that I believe should be added to the metrics. But then when it comes time to put that in place, I would not use letter grades. I would not, for the reason that I've already articulated. I actually loved the system that we had before. I liked talking about schools of excellence and schools of distinction, and priority schools, and if you didn't meet a certain level and you didn't have growth, only then would you be considered a low-performance school. And so I actually will be interested in having a conversation around a model that has more measures but uses language, and we can come up with different language, but doesn't sort of, I believe, use those letter grades going forward. That's what I would be interested in.
Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about early literacy. North Carolina has focused heavily in recent years on early grade reading improvements through initiatives such as Read to Achieve and Science of Reading, resulting in we've seen some increases recently in student reading scores and literacy rates as a result of some of those initiatives. What are your thoughts on our state's literacy initiatives, and what other changes, if any, do you recommend in curriculum and instruction for K-12 students?
So I actually am supportive of the efforts that we've put towards Science of Reading. Again, I think context is important as to why I'm supportive of that. When this state decided to go with that direction, there were 6 states that joined a cohort around how to implement this and try to implement it most effectively. And each state had their own set of individuals that would work together on implementation. Certainly with Catherine Truitt being the state superintendent. And then I was involved on that team. Each state had their, like a foundation, philanthropy person. And so I was the one that was requested to serve on that team. And so got deeply involved and try to understand how one might implement that program. Now, as I will share with others, and as we all know in this room, you can always quibble with implementation issues and how one might do things better or differently. And so there's certainly things that I would do differently. I'm not going to suggest to you that they would be better. Things like trying to be sure that we provided the resources for professional development so that teachers got paid for all of the additional time and effort they're putting into making this dramatic change. I would be focused on things like being sure that we provide the kind of materials that are actually engaging for students. Because I do worry that sometimes students might get materials and they don't see themselves in them. And so, I'd be focused on that kind of thing as part of the implementation. The Read to Achieve, I think, in its core, probably had some good thoughts, good ideas in it. Was not a big fan of, this idea of retaining so many students, and so would want to modify that if I were placed in office or elected. So that's the reading, early literacy efforts. Other things one can do. So I'm actually very intrigued by what I am hearing around what folks are thinking about for math. I need to learn a lot more. And so I don't suggest to you that I am even close to being an expert on that. I am a fan of what the State Board of Education did with regards to social studies standards. And really trying to be sure that those standards included an honest teaching of our history and our state and country. And so very supportive of that. And then you heard earlier, I believe in that quote about academics and character development, and so would want to engage with so many individuals across the state about how one puts together a comprehensive statewide character development program as well.
Okay. All right, thank you. So this next issue is somewhat nuanced, I think. It emerged with the 2023 budget around an early graduate program that requires local districts to offer a 3-year graduation option for all high school students. Budget language forbids local districts from requiring more than the state minimum number of credits to graduate, which is currently 22 credits. While some have applauded this new program, many districts and even the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction have asked for law change to allow districts to continue requiring additional credits for 4-year graduation. What are your initial thoughts on the new early graduate program, and what changes, if any, would you like to see with that?
Yeah, thank you for this question. And this is one that I would put in that clear category of I would want to listen a lot more, listen to folks like folks in this room before I land on any particular direction. So I'll give you sort of first reactions, if you will, and then please appreciate that these first reactions may not be second reactions after I have conversations with y'all and many others. So first reactions would be, gosh, it'd be sort of cool to be a high school student and get out in 3 years. And for a small subset of students in high school, that probably makes some sense. And so we oughtn't sort of prohibit that from happening. But as I think about most of the young people, that really should not be really touted as the way to go. Young people are growing and learning and maturing. And this idea that in 3 years of high school they're ready for, as my kids said, adulting, I really worry about that. And so, we ought to, in my mind, treat this as for a small subset of young folks where it makes absolute sense. There's a lot of counseling and support around that. You're engaging with the parents or guardians to be sure it's the right thing for those students. So that's that part. The minimum now requirement of can't do more than 22 credits strikes me as my initial reaction is that seems to be a big challenge for me to get on board with. Because I start to think about, starting to try to add up the number of credits, and I'm thinking, but wait a minute, where are all those electives that we want to be sure that our kids are exposed, have the opportunity to participate in and be exposed to? And if we want to do the really significant work around exposing kids to opportunities in career and to technical education and the coursework that they must take, how are we going to fit that into 22 credits most effectively? And so it can be done, I suppose, to take out certain things and make our educational opportunities in our high schools more limiting, but that doesn't seem right. And so, I think about so many districts and how they are requiring more. And so I would want us to have further conversation on that. I also think about resources, and I'm talking about funding resources here, and what impact that then has on our already woefully underfunded schools. And I can only imagine that then folks are going to want to take more dollars away from our schools, as they're now saying, well, you don't need it because there are less credits needed. So I would want to open up again a more of a conversation around these issues. Absolutely need to learn more, and perhaps y'all would suggest to me that I need to expand my thinking, but that's where it is at this moment.
Okay, thank you. So we've talked a little bit about academics, but we know that students can't be successful if they don't have a support system where they feel safe and their other needs are met. Addressing student mental health needs continues to be a top priority for our schools and those who lead them, especially with data showing increasing rates of student depression and anxiety. As state superintendent, how will you improve efforts to address student mental health concerns and safety?
Yeah, so much of this, I think, first of all, needs to be in the advocacy space. As I was describing, how to think about the state superintendent of public instruction, and the need for us to understand that more resources, more dollars needs to be provided so that we can have more professionals working with our students, professionals who have expertise in mental health issues, in emotional issues, and in physical issues. I think all sort of fits together. So we need to have more counselors and social workers and nurses, and the list goes on and on. And so I believe that we need to have sort of strong advocacy around that and how important that is to the development of each individual student. Certainly, it also, I think, lands on the side of management. So if we're not going to have additional resources, how do we take the resources that we have and provide them in ways that will be beneficial for more students? I find that we're going to have to be in a place where we're going to have to find dollars elsewhere. If the General Assembly isn't going to provide them, then we're going to have to find other grant opportunities. We're going to have to go back into our communities to help them understand the need for these kind of services to be provided.
Thank you. The role of state superintendent not only oversees the important work being done in our school districts, but also the work being done specifically at the Department of Public Instruction. What is your perspective on the deep work of DPI and on issues like remote work and other operational and kind of structural things at DPI to ensure that the department is best equipped to support school districts and charter schools statewide?
Great. So first, let me start by saying that I certainly think and have certainly interacted, I think, with a lot of incredible individuals in the Department of Public Instruction. And so I want folk to understand sort of that as a starting place, that there are so many great folks who are doing really important work there. Second, we got to be sure that the department has a service mentality. And so, the work that is most critically important in the entire system of education rests in our schools and in our local districts, and in our charter schools. We must always sort of walk in every day with the understanding that we aren't about the work of what's important to us, but what is important and will be beneficial to what's happening in schools. And so that is part of that mindset change that I would want to be sure exists in the Department of Public Instruction. Which leads into things like, are you present when I need you in the office or otherwise? And so I'm not opposed to some kind of hybrid situation. I'm not opposed to that. But if our schools have our school folk in their schools every day, shouldn't we also be in the Department of Public Instruction at the ready in the office every day? With the understanding that we might be able to, because it's not the same situation, have some days where you might be able to work from home or in the field or otherwise. But so I don't want to move all the way, to say, well, everyone must be back day one, January 1st, everyone. I think there's a way to have some hybrid opportunities, but the vast majority of what we do, we need to be in the office and available to truly be of service to our schools.
All right, thank you. So we have appreciated your time and attention this morning, and sharing a little bit more about yourself and your commitments. We do just have a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to give you a chance to share any closing thoughts that you would like to impart before we wrap things up today.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be with y'all today. I'm going to put it this way because I don't know any other way to put it. I believe that the very soul of public education is on the ballot this November. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not an alarmist. For those who know me, know that Mo, you're so chilled. You're so laid back. And I'm telling you, if I had hair, the hair would be on fire. We are in a moment where if we're not careful, we're not going to have a public education system that we would all want our children to be educated in. This is that moment. And so, and I say this in a way that I want you to appreciate and understand that this is bigger than Mo Green. I happen to be one of the individuals left standing to have the kind of conversations we must have across this state. But this is bigger than that. Whoever fills this role will have an enormous impact on where we're going in this state with regards to public education. And so I believe it's important that whoever is in this role understands the moment and will meet it. and that folk who believe in public education, I like to think of them as champions of public education, will also understand this moment and will meet it. I greatly appreciate you for giving me this opportunity to share just what's on my heart and what's in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give Mr. Green a round of applause.